Before his trial, Socrates lived in a city that burned with brilliance. Athens was at the height of its power, a hub of philosophy, politics, art, and war. The Parthenon gleamed over the city, while citizens debated ethics in the agora and voted in the world's first democracy. It was here, in the noise and tension of a young republic, that Socrates found his calling. Not to rule, but to question. Socrates didn't die in a blaze of violence or rebellion. His death came quietly, but behind it lay decades of tension, conflict, and uncomfortable truths. Athens was no longer the city it had once been. The golden age had passed, and the scars of war and political instability left its people searching for certainty. In that fragile climate, a man like Socrates, who questioned everything, became more dangerous than comforting. According to legend, it began with a visit to the oracle at Delphi. Socrates' friend, Chaerephon, asked the Pythia if anyone in Athens was wiser than Socrates. Her answer shocked them: no one. But Socrates didn't celebrate. He was confused. He claimed to know nothing. And so, he set out to prove the oracle wrong, questioning everyone he could find. But the more he asked, the more he saw. Others believed they knew, but didn't. That was his wisdom, knowing what he didn't know. Socrates walked the streets of Athens barefoot, asking questions no one wanted to answer. He challenged poets, craftsmen, and politicians, forcing them to confront the limits of their knowledge. To many, he was brilliant. To others, he was arrogant, subversive, and deeply unsettling. His refusal to conform, to play politics, or to stop speaking truth made him both admired and feared. And yet, he had no interest in power. His power was in ideas. Socrates claimed to avoid politics, but the men around him told a different story. Alcibiades, the brilliant general who defected to Sparta. Critias, a brutal leader of the 30 tyrants. Both were once his students. Socrates didn't choose their paths, but in post-war Athens, guilt by association was enough to turn admiration into suspicion. Athens had lost the Peloponnesian War, and with that loss came a crisis of identity. The 30 tyrants briefly ruled in terror, followed by the restoration of democracy. But trust had been shattered. People looked for scapegoats, foreigners, intellectuals, anyone who didn't fall in line. Socrates, whose former students included men like Critias, one of the tyrants, became a convenient target. Guilt by association would shadow him in the coming years. Athens had changed. The wounds from war hadn't healed, and the streets buzzed with suspicion. Political factions argued over how to rebuild the city, who to trust, and whether democracy could survive another crisis. In this climate of fear, even words felt dangerous. People began to whisper about those who spoke too freely, about those who stirred thought instead of silence. Socrates, always questioning, was beginning to stand out in ways that felt threatening. He taught not through instruction, but interrogation. The Socratic method wasn't gentle, it was relentless. And in a time of fear, that method was threatening. Socrates didn't believe in the gods of the city, at least not in the way the state demanded. He spoke of a personal voice, a daimon, that guided him. To religious conservatives, this wasn't just strange, it was blasphemy. To political leaders, it was defiance cloaked in philosophy. Before the trial ever began, the public had already made up its mind. Whispers of blasphemy, rumors of corruption, Socrates' name stirred unease. In a city still healing from tyranny, free thought felt dangerous. And those who stirred the pot, especially ones with past ties to traitors, were judged long before stepping into court. In 399 BCE, the charges came: impiety and corrupting the youth. Not theft, not murder, ideas. Socrates stood trial not for crimes, but for questioning the status quo. He could have fled, but he didn't. He could have begged for mercy, but he didn't. Instead, he stood before the jury and said he would continue doing exactly what he had always done. To stop questioning would be to stop living. His defense wasn't crafted to win. It was crafted to stand firm. He claimed the unexamined life was not worth living, and that he had a duty to Athens to provoke thought. The jury saw a man who would never bend, and so they voted guilty. Even then, Socrates could have chosen exile, but instead, he suggested his punishment should be a reward. Free meals for life, like an Olympic victor. The court wasn't amused. They sentenced him to death. And so, in a quiet chamber, surrounded by those who loved him, Socrates drank the hemlock. His last words were not of fear, but of debt to the god Asclepius. "We owe a rooster," he said. Even in death, his mind reached beyond. He died not as a criminal, but as a man faithful to his principles to the very end. In his final hours, Socrates comforted those around him. He spoke not of regret, but of the soul, and the hope that death was not an end, but a journey. His students clung to his every word, torn between grief and awe. Even as poison approached, he remained the teacher, guiding minds, not with fear, but with peace. His death stunned Athens. Some began to question whether the city had killed its own conscience. His student, Plato, was forever changed. In Socrates' absence, a new movement was born, not of politics, but of philosophy, a commitment to critical thought, to ethics, to inner freedom. Socrates became not a martyr of religion, but a martyr of reason. Over 2,400 years later, we still speak his name. We teach his method. We ask his questions. Socrates didn't write books. He didn't build monuments. And yet, his legacy may outlast them all, because he proved that one voice, armed with questions, could shake a city, challenge a world, and echo through time.